Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I had a subscriber ask a question, and I think it's a fantastic question. I'm going to link it here above. I'll go ahead and just ask it. He basically said, if full body routines are optimal for people who are completely drug-free, why don't any of the top natural bodybuilders that I know of actually use them? That is a fantastic question. I'm going to see if I can answer this question in 10 to 12 minutes. I don't know that I can because there's a lot of different elements to consider here with this question. But I'm going to do my best to try to answer that for you guys while I relax and get my places in. So let's try. All right. First of all, I want to cover the two components of this. One, the actual time frame component, and two, the possibility that the top natural bodybuilders are even natural. All right, so let's cover part one first. Let's look at the fact that from a time frame perspective, everyone will eventually reach their point of tremendously diminished returns with training. When we talk about full body training and muscle protein synthesis uptime, it's simply about getting to the next level and the threshold of where your gains slow down further and further and further a little bit quicker. What you need to understand is that anybody will eventually reach close to their natural limits to the point to where they're going to gain only an ounce or two, or at least at the most half a pound of muscle per year, no matter what sort of training style they do, as long as they use progressive overload and they continue to work all the muscles in the body with, again, progressive overload and get stronger and increase the volume and workload over time, mainly just the workload itself. Everyone will eventually reach that threshold. And I mean, literally, you could come in and train really hard one day a week, every Monday for an hour, and you will eventually reach your natural limits doing that. The thing is, it might take you 2 to 3 times as long as someone else doing it differently, meaning what someone else might achieve in 3 years, it might take you 7, 8, or 9 years to achieve doing it that way, but you will still probably reach that point. And that is a big factor when we start talking about training for naturals. Because essentially when we say every year you're going to see a diminished return, meaning maybe 50% of the gains you made the year before, because you're only going to put on at most 20, 25, and in a few rare cases 30 pounds of muscle from the time that you start of actual true muscle mass. That is basically lifetime limits. Well, you're going to reach that diminished return no matter what, to where it's going to get slower and slower as you get closer to that limit. It doesn't matter how you train. So when we say best, I don't mean optimal, because the word optimal is it is a buzzword. It's an advertising and marketing term that is used to hype things up. You really need to avoid that in the training and nutrition world, because you're never going to find optimal. We don't have the scientific equipment or the money or resources to even find optimal, and optimal anything is probably going to change for you from week to week based upon a lot of factors. So don't worry about optimal. Just worry about good, good enough, better, great. Those are terms you should probably use. Let's avoid optimal. Probably a whole nother video I should do on that. But over time, you're eventually going to reach that point. Doesn't matter whether you train full body 3 days a week, whether you do a body part split, an upper lower split, or you just come in and train really hard one day a week and train everything and get out. You're eventually going to reach that point. When I talk about being better, we simply mean, can you shave time off of that? You know, it's kind of like saying that because you opened a door and went through it, that your way of opening the door is the most efficient or quickest way. It may not be. And you see a lot of that in the training world. And people use the fact that they made it through a door as evidence that their method of doing it works, whether they hopped around on one foot and did 3 circles or they hopped around on their left foot. They argue about what's better because they made it through the door, that their method is proof of it. Well, it's not. Because when you're dealing with something like training like that, anyone who sticks it out long enough eventually makes it through the door. They'll reach close to their natural limits if they simply put in enough time and consistency. Our argument is, can they reach that point of massively diminished returns in 3 years instead of 7? Or instead of 4, or instead of 5? That's all we're looking at. And the full body programming, because of total muscle protein synthesis uptime, is going to get you through your noob gains quicker. It's going to finish them out faster. It's going to get you through your intermediate phase more quickly. Again, you're shaving months or even years off of reaching a goal. That's all we're looking at. We're not saying you can't reach your goals on the other. And for someone who is talking about, well, I'm going to continue training for life and I'm not concerned about squeezing out every single ounce of muscle I can every year for the first few years. I just enjoy training and I eventually want to get there. Well, then in that case, you can do whatever you enjoy most, because it's going to be about consistency of training, and consistently putting in the work year after year after year is going to be more important than what might be optimal, because you're going to be more consistent, and it is the consistent work that eventually gets you there. So for that person, there's no point in trying to figure it out. The only people who need to worry about better is people who are like, I have a time frame to work with. I want to do this as quickly as possible. And that actually isn't everyone who trains. So you've got that factor to consider, and you got to consider that a lot of these guys have been training for many years at a certain threshold. As long as they've maximally stimulated everything, or even for the entire many years that they've been training, as long as they've sufficiently stimulated each muscle group, they're going to get close to as big as they possibly can anyways, irrespective of what methods they use to get there, because they've just put in the time consistently over the years. Now, the other factor to consider is what makes you think that most or any of the top natural bodybuilders are actually natural. I would say that's a very naive perspective, and here's why. The drug testing in natural bodybuilding is horrifically bad. If it even exists at all. Many natural pro bodybuilders have never even been drug tested. If you've never been drug tested, you could have used literally anything you wanted. Your other problem with it is, of course, look at the Olympics. We've discussed this over and over. 2012 Olympics, $4 billion were spent on drug testing. They developed one new metabolite test for a single anabolic out of the 30-something anabolics that exist. A new metabolite test for one, just one. And they had over 200 new positives show up for that drug from ones that had previously tested clean. Over 200 for a single drug. At the Olympics, where they'd already spent $4 billion. They don't have money for good drug testing in natural bodybuilding. In fact, there's no desire to really catch them, because at the end of the day, natural bodybuilding is used to sell supplements and sponsorships and everything else, right? They need the guys to look good. They don't reward natural looking physiques in natural pro bodybuilding. They allow guys up there and reward them with first place wins and second place wins all the time, who very clearly have a look only obtainable with drugs. So the judges reward drug-like physiques. They don't discourage them with the judging. And the drug testing is very, very minimal and very easy to bypass. At the Olympic level, you got to be smart. You might even have to hire an expert to help you through it. Natural bodybuilding level drug testing, even Jerry Ward broke down a video explaining how to get through a lot of it. And he actually gave the prescriptions, the drugs, how long to come off of them before your show. He even broke that down, and he's not a smart guy at all. He even could successfully do that. So think about that for a minute. If Jerry Ward is capable of just making a video saying, yeah, they just did this, this, and this, the guys I knew, and they flew right through. If he can come up with an answer on how to do it consistently, then anybody can. It just isn't that hard. There's no real difficulty to it. The only difficulty is if you chose to use drugs for a long time that weren't as easy to get through, and then you decide you go to do natural bodybuilding and you have drugs that still show up in your system for 5 months, 12 months, things like that. But had you known you were going to do natural bodybuilding 2 years out, people simply select their drugs better knowing they're doing natural bodybuilding, knowing that they can test with clean with flying colors if they're just careful. It really isn't even that difficult. The people who would struggle most would be people like on TRT, because the drugs actually prescribed for TRT can show up on urine for like 5 months. But a lot of stuff that guys have access to, they can easily slide through the testing. So when the actual competition and the judges reward drug-like physiques, reward them. Not punish them when they're very clearly enhanced. And the drug testing is really, really easy to get through. The drugs give a clear advantage with no penalties and minimal chance of getting caught if you can just do a little math. What makes you think that in that competitive environment, naturals actually really have a fighting chance? Or that pretty much everyone in the top ranks of natural bodybuilding is probably using, because it's easy to get around the rules, it's easy to cheat, and the cheating is actually rewarded, not punished when it's clearly obvious to the judges. So the probability that very many of those guys, if any of them, are actually clean is pretty slim. So I wouldn't use them as examples personally. I mean, think about it. Why would you really think that they're clean in light of that? Because they say they are? because they passed a drug test that they knew was coming months ahead of time and could just say, well, I'm only going to use drugs with a 24-hour or 72-hour detection and cut them out a few days before. I'm just not going to use drugs that can show up for months or weeks. I mean, that's all they have to do. It's that simple. It is literally that simple. So in what world would you think that it's even reasonable that they are when this is competing as their ambition, and a lot of them get sponsorships and interviews and modeling gigs and coaching jobs and everything as a result of this? They've got a financial interest in it at this point. Not because the bodybuilding itself pays much, but all these sponsorships and interviews and everything, they get rewarded for it. So there is actually a real reason to go ahead and cheat. And again, since the cheating is actually rewarded, those who cheat are simply more likely to win. They have a clear advantage in all ways with no downfalls, no negatives. So it's really silly to think that they actually are clean. So I wouldn't use them as examples of how you should train or do things if you really are drug-free, just throwing it out there. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.